If you ever felt a sudden shift in a woman's energy, like one day she's warm, attentive, leaning into you, and the next day she pulls away like you're a stranger, then listen to me carefully, because that shift, it's never random, and if you miss the signs, you won't notice the moment another man walks into the emotional space she stopped giving you. Stay with me until the end, because I'm going to reveal a final psychological trigger that almost guarantees infidelity if it's left unchecked, something most men never even hear about until it's too late. And before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and like the video so you never miss the kind of truth most people are terrified to speak out loud. Now, let me talk to you directly as a psychologist, as a woman, and as someone who has spent years watching the darkest patterns play out behind closed doors. Cheating almost never begins with the physical act. It starts quietly, in the mind. It begins when a woman stops feeling something that she used to feel with you and begins feeling it somewhere else. Most men believe cheating is about desire, opportunity, or a moment of weakness. But that's naive. Women cheat for psychological reasons long before they cheat for physical ones. It happens when emotional hunger meets emotional neglect, when validation dries up, when connection becomes routine and predictable, when a man she trusted becomes a man she can't feel anymore. And this is where the truth becomes uncomfortable. A woman does not drift away suddenly. She drifts in tiny steps. She tests you in silence. She watches whether you notice, whether you adjust, whether you still see her. Because when a woman feels unseen long enough, she starts searching for someone who notices the things you stopped paying attention to. Not because she's cruel, not because she planned it, but because emotional starvation drives human behavior more powerfully than people want to admit. Men lose a woman emotionally before they ever lose her physically. That's the first psychological reality you need to understand if you want to protect your relationship from the slow, silent slide toward betrayal. If she starts becoming more reactive, more distant, more busy, more irritated by things that never used to bother her, it means she's fighting herself. Women don't cheat without battling guilt, doubt, fear, and morality long before anything happens. So when she starts acting different, it's often because she's in an internal war you don't even know is happening. But here's the painful part. She won't tell you she feels disconnected. She won't tell you she feels invisible. She won't tell you she feels emotionally abandoned because she wants you to notice without being told. She wants you to respond without needing instructions. She wants you to care because you want to care, not because she had to ask. And when that doesn't happen, a psychological door opens, a door every man needs to understand before it's too late. That's where the first major trigger for cheating begins. The trigger almost no man recognizes until the damage is already done. There is a moment in every relationship where a woman silently evaluates her emotional safety. Not her physical safety, her emotional safety. And when that safety collapses, even slightly, a dangerous psychological shift begins. This is the first major trigger that leads women toward cheating, the collapse of emotional closeness. Most men think emotional closeness is something you build once and then it stays forever, like a trophy on a shelf. But for a woman, emotional closeness is a living, breathing thing. If it's not being fed, it dies. And when it dies, she doesn't scream, she doesn't rage, she doesn't beg. She withdraws, quietly, gradually, subtly. The first sign? She stops sharing the little things, the details of her day, her frustrations, her excitement, her random thoughts. When a woman no longer wants to share the small things, it means she no longer feels safe sharing the big things. And when she stops sharing the big things, the emotional connection you once had becomes a memory instead of a reality. This is where most men make the fatal mistake. They misinterpret her silence as peace. They think a quiet woman is a content woman. No, a quiet woman is an emotionally withdrawing woman. A woman who feels unheard will always find someone who listens. Not intentionally, not because she's seeking an affair, but because emotional deprivation doesn't stay empty, it gets filled. Women cheat not because they are impulsive, but because they are emotional creatures who seek connection above all else. And if she finds someone who listens, who shows curiosity, who pays attention to the parts of her you stopped noticing, her mind will drift before her body ever does. It often starts innocently. A coworker asks how her day is and actually listens. A friend responds to the parts of her she feels you no longer see. Someone compliments her in a way that feels genuine. Someone remembers the things you forgot. And when a woman feels emotionally validated by someone else, she experiences something that terrifies her: contrast. The comparison between how you make her feel and how someone else makes her feel becomes the emotional wedge that separates loyalty from temptation. When emotional closeness dies, she starts to see you differently. She starts interpreting your words through disappointment, your habits through resentment, your distance through abandonment. She stops opening up and instead she starts closing doors. Doors you may not even notice until they're locked. But here's the psychological truth most men never understand. Women don't cheat because they want a new man. They cheat because they want to feel like themselves again. They chase the version of themselves who felt alive, desired, appreciated, and important. When they stop feeling that with you, they become vulnerable to feeling it somewhere else. This first trigger, the collapse of emotional closeness, is the foundation of all infidelity. If it happens and nothing interrupts it, the rest unfolds like a predictable psychological pattern. And that leads directly into the second dark trigger, the one that turns emotional distance into emotional replacement. There is a point where emotional distance doesn't just hurt her, it reshapes how she sees the entire relationship. When a woman feels disconnected for long enough, she enters the second psychological trigger that pushes her toward cheating, the rise of emotional replacement. This is the stage most men mistake for mood swings, attitude problems, or her just being dramatic. But what you're actually seeing is a shift in emotional allegiance. She begins giving pieces of herself to someone else, sometimes without even realizing she's doing it. It doesn't start with flirting. It doesn't start with physical attraction. It starts with comfort, with relief, with contrast. Someone else becomes easier to talk to than you. Someone else becomes emotionally predictable. Someone else makes her feel understood without effort. And when that happens, her brain forms a new emotional pathway, one that feels safer than the one connected to you. Here's the part men underestimate. A woman does not need to feel romantically interested in someone for emotional replacement to start. She only needs to feel understood in a moment when she feels unseen by you. That moment plants the seed. Repetition waters it. And emotional absence from you becomes the sunlight that helps it grow. Once emotional replacement begins, her behavior changes in subtle ways that most men miss. She guards her phone more closely, not because she's hiding something physical, but because she's hiding the conversation that makes her feel alive again. She becomes protective of her emotional space. She gets irritated when you ask simple questions, not because she dislikes you, but because she feels emotionally full somewhere else. This is also the stage where she begins rewriting the relationship in her mind. She starts remembering the arguments you had, not the moments you held her. She remembers the times you dismissed her worries, not the times you comforted her. She focuses on your flaws with laser precision, not because they suddenly appeared, but because emotional replacement changes emotional perception. A woman who feels emotionally fed by someone else will gradually lose patience with the man who used to feed her. And she won't tell you this, not because she wants to deceive you, but because deep down she feels guilty for even enjoying that emotional closeness with someone else. That guilt doesn't make her stop. It makes her hide it. And when a woman starts hiding parts of her emotional life, cheating is no longer a distant possibility. It becomes a psychological trajectory. This is how it usually plays out. She starts seeking emotional comfort in the other person more frequently. She becomes more tolerant of their flaws and less tolerant of yours. She begins to imagine conversations, moments, or scenarios with them. She starts comparing the way they treat her to the way you treat her. And comparison is where loyalty quietly erodes. Men often ask, why didn't she just tell me she was unhappy? Because once emotional replacement begins, she doesn't want to fix the relationship. She wants to escape the version of herself she became in it. But there is a final trigger, a darker one, the one that doesn't just make cheating possible, it makes it feel justified. There comes a moment, quiet, subtle, but incredibly powerful, when a woman crosses the psychological line from "I shouldn't" to "I deserve better." This is the third and final trigger that pushes a woman toward cheating, justification. And once this trigger activates, the risk of infidelity doesn't just increase, it multiplies. This is the stage where emotional replacement transforms into emotional rationalization, where guilt begins to fade, where she starts telling herself a story that makes betrayal feel like relief instead of wrongdoing. When a woman reaches this point, she's not asking, "Should I cheat?" She's asking, "Why should I stay loyal?" And that shift is devastating because it means she has mentally stepped outside the relationship while her body is still in it. Here's what most men never understand. A woman doesn't justify cheating by focusing on the new man. She justifies it by focusing on what she feels she's missing with you. She builds a psychological case in her head, piece by piece. He never listens. He doesn't care like he used to. I'm always last on his priority list. I give so much and get so little back. I feel more alone in this relationship than I would being single. These thoughts don't appear overnight. They grow through repetition, disappointment, and unmet emotional needs. And here's what makes the justification stage so dangerous. It gives her permission to do what she already feels drawn toward emotionally. When she believes she's been emotionally neglected, she stops feeling like she's betraying you and starts feeling like you betrayed her first. That shift allows her to tell herself, "This isn't wrong. This is what I should have had. This is what I deserve. This is the version of me I miss." This is also where you'll see a dramatic change in her behavior. She becomes emotionally numb toward you. She stops reacting to your efforts. She no longer argues because she's already checked out. Her empathy toward you drops. Her tone becomes colder, more distant, more transactional. Why? Because in her mind, she's no longer your partner. She's a woman preparing to detach. This is the point at which she may start seeking physical intimacy elsewhere. Not because she planned it, but because emotional justification removed the psychological barrier that once protected the relationship. The betrayal becomes a solution to the emptiness she's been carrying. And the hardest truth? By the time a woman feels justified in cheating, she has already rewritten the story of your relationship in her mind. Not to hurt you, but to remove the guilt from her own decisions. Most men try to fix the relationship at this stage. They suddenly become attentive, affectionate, apologetic, trying to revive a connection they didn't realize was dying. But to her, it often feels too late, because once justification settles in, her emotional loyalty is already gone. This is the darkest part of female psychology. Women don't cheat out of impulse. They cheat out of emotional survival. And if you miss the signs leading up to this moment, you miss the only window you ever had to prevent it. But there's one more thing you need to understand. Something just as important as these 3 triggers, and something men never prepare for. The mindset a woman enters after cheating, and why many women don't even regret it the way men expect. When a woman finally crosses that line, when cheating goes from an unthinkable act to an emotionally justified decision, her psychology doesn't return to normal afterward. In fact, she enters a mindset most men are completely unprepared for, and this is where the truth becomes uncomfortable. Many women don't feel the regret men expect, not immediately, not in the way you imagine, not in the way movies portray it. Because for a woman, cheating is almost never about the physical moment. It's about the emotional void that moment temporarily fills. And when that void has been growing inside her for months, sometimes years, that relief feels like validation. A man cheats for novelty. A woman cheats for meaning. And when meaning is what she's been desperate for, the act doesn't register as betrayal in her nervous system. It registers as emotional oxygen. This is the part most men struggle to understand. Women don't feel guilt until the emotional high fades. They don't feel shame until the validation stops. They don't feel remorse until the consequences become real. In the beginning, right after cheating, she often feels 3 things: relief, clarity, and emotional confirmation. Relief because she finally felt something she hasn't felt in a long time. Clarity because the contrast between you and someone else has snapped into focus. Confirmation because the story she told herself, that she deserved better, feels justified now. This is why some women act even colder after cheating. It's why she becomes less reactive, less emotional, less invested in your pain. It's why she can look you in the eyes and seem detached. She's not heartless. She's emotionally recalibrated. Her brain has already shifted to a new source of emotional fulfillment, and the relationship, you, no longer sit at the center of her emotional world. And here's the psychological twist few men ever grasp. A woman who cheats and doesn't immediately feel guilt is usually a woman who emotionally left long before she physically did. This is why her behavior after cheating can feel contradictory. She may act normal or extremely distant. She may be unusually kind or strangely irritated. She may seek peace or she may provoke conflict. These aren't random reactions. These are coping mechanisms. Ways to reduce cognitive dissonance, the internal conflict between who she believes she is and what she has done. If she becomes colder, she's detaching to avoid guilt. If she becomes nicer, she's compensating to avoid suspicion. If she becomes distant, she's mentally preparing for separation. If she becomes overly present, she's hiding the emotional chaos within. But here's the deepest truth. A woman rarely cheats to replace you at first. She cheats to replace how she feels inside the relationship. And if you don't understand this, you'll misunderstand every sign she gives you afterward. Many men react with desperation at this stage, trying to win her back, smothering her with affection, begging for closeness. But that only pushes her further away, because when she's in this mindset, pressure feels suffocating, not healing. The real danger is what comes next, the moment when she decides whether to return, detach, or double down on her emotional escape. That choice determines everything, and most men never see it coming until they've already lost her completely. There is a final stage, a crossroads, where a woman decides the future of the relationship after she has cheated, or even after she has come dangerously close. And this stage is where men either lose everything, or finally understand the truth that could have saved them from the beginning. This stage is called emotional recalibration, and it determines whether she returns to the relationship, drifts away permanently, or forms a deeper attachment to the person who filled the emotional void you didn't notice growing. When a woman reaches this point, she evaluates the relationship from a place of emotional distance, not emotional connection. She isn't asking, "Do I love him?" Love doesn't disappear that easily. Instead, she asks herself, "Do I feel like myself with him? Do I feel safe expressing my emotions again? Can I trust that my needs will be met this time? Does this relationship feel like a home or a prison?" This is why sudden efforts from a man often fail. Not because the effort isn't genuine, but because it arrives after she has detached emotionally. When her emotional system has already recalibrated, she doesn't feel the same reward from your improvements. She sees them as attempts to fix a connection she no longer experiences. In this stage, she becomes hyper-aware of every behavior, yours and hers. She watches how you react. She notices whether you become controlling, insecure, desperate, or calm. She sees whether you take responsibility or shift blame, whether you seek understanding or demand explanations. And she uses these reactions to decide which direction she feels safest moving toward. Here's the part men rarely realize. Once a woman has emotionally stepped outside the relationship, she evaluates your behaviors with almost clinical precision. She's not reacting emotionally anymore. She's observing, gathering data, deciding. If she sees genuine emotional awareness, consistency, patience, and accountability, she may slowly rebuild the connection. Not quickly, not dramatically, but quietly, cautiously, gradually. She will test your emotional stability. She will observe your consistency. She will wait to see if your effort is real or temporary. But if she sees emotional chaos, anger, victimhood, manipulation, begging, accusations, or attempts to guilt her back into loyalty, she distances herself even further, because to her, that behavior confirms the emotional story she used to justify cheating in the first place. This stage defines everything because it's where a woman decides not based on the past, but based on her emotional truth in the present. And the truth is simple. If she feels emotionally safe, she returns. If she feels emotionally starved, she leaves. If she feels emotionally awakened by someone else, she drifts into a new attachment. And here's the hardest truth of all. Cheating is rarely the beginning of the end. It is the final symptom of problems that started long before. A woman cheats emotionally before she ever cheats physically. She leaves mentally before she ever leaves physically. She seeks connection long before she seeks intimacy. The question is not, why did she cheat? The real question is, what emotional need went unmet so consistently that she no longer saw herself inside the relationship? If you understand the three triggers, emotional collapse, emotional replacement, and emotional justification, you can prevent the entire psychological chain reaction before it ever begins. And if you want more powerful breakdowns like this, truth spoken without filters, without sugarcoating, and without fear, make sure you subscribe, like the video, and turn on notifications. Because as long as you're here, I'll keep revealing the psychology men were never meant to hear.